Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a productive week. Today, we need to have a very serious clear the air moment. About 10 days ago, I put out a video discussing the massive wave of gun laws hitting California as we roll into 2026. Since then, my inbox has been absolutely flooded. I've had hundreds of you reaching out, and to be honest, the confusion is at an all-time high. Half of you are saying, you said the barrel background checks don't start for another year, and the other half are screaming, it starts January 1st, I just got an email from an online retailer. Well, the truth is, you're both technically right, and that is exactly the problem. Today, I want to pull back the curtain on a specific legislative shell game that California is playing with multiple bills that are all converging at once. We are going to look at the difference between a law being on the books and a law being enforced. Because if you don't understand the gap between these two dates, you could find yourself facing a misdemeanor, or worse, without even knowing you broke a rule. We're going to break down the effective versus operative strategy, look at what's happening with firearm barrels, talk about the new home storage requirements that just kicked in, and then dive into something even more insidious, a new law that doesn't target your guns at all, but targets your ability to even talk about them. Before we dive into the legal weeds, let's talk about why this is happening. California has perfected a strategy of staggered implementation. They pass a law in 2025. It technically becomes law on January 1st, 2026, but they delay the actual paperwork or background check requirements until 2027. Why? Because it creates a gray zone where you think you're safe, but the state is already building the infrastructure to track you. Take SB 704, for example. This is the bill that targets firearm barrels. For decades, a barrel was just a piece of metal. You could buy it online, it came to your porch, and you installed it. Those days are officially over as of January 1st, 2026, sort of. This is where it gets incredibly murky, and I'm going to show you exactly how the state is using this confusion to stymie lawsuits before they even start. Now, real quick, before we get into the breakdown, I have to mention the people who make this channel possible. This video is proudly sponsored by Attorneys on Retainer, backed by Attorneys for Freedom. Listen, if you live in California, the ground is shifting under your feet every single day. You can be a law-abiding citizen on Monday and a potential criminal on Tuesday because of a clarification from the DOJ. That is why you need a legal team that doesn't just know the law, but actively fights for the Second Amendment. Attorneys on Retainer is the only firm I know of that specializes exclusively in self-defense cases. If you're someone who carries to protect your family, you need more than just insurance. You need a law firm that actually has your back. Right now, as we head into 2026, they have a special offer where you can lock in your membership price all the way until 2030. If you sign up before the end of this year, your rate is guaranteed no matter how many crazy laws Sacramento passes. They even have a new program where if you're charged with a felony for defending yourself, they don't just send one lawyer, they send a team of 4. It's the kind of protection usually reserved for the elite. Check out the link in the description, use the code, and get that peace of mind. You're going to need it, especially with what we're about to discuss. Okay, let's get back into it. The biggest point of confusion I'm seeing is the timeline for SB 704. I want to explain a concept that most people, and even some lawyers, get wrong. The difference between the effective date and the operative date. In California, a law almost always becomes effective on January the 1st of the year after it's signed. For SB 704, that date was January 1st, 2026. On that day, the law officially exists. It is on the books. However, the legislature often includes an operative date, which is when the actual actions of the law must be followed. For the background checks and the $5 eligibility fees on barrels, that date isn't until July 1st, 2027. So, you might be thinking, great, I have another 18 months to buy barrels online. Not so fast. This is where the trap is set. While the background check portion is delayed, the requirement that the transfer must happen in person at a licensed dealer is technically effective now. I've already seen reports of major online retailers, places like Brownells or Midway, halting direct shipments to California residents because they don't want to deal with the liability of the effective date. They are essentially forcing you into the new system early because the law says the transaction must be completed in person by an FFL as of January 2026. The state doesn't have the background check system ready yet, but they've already killed your ability to get a barrel delivered to your door. It's a classic California pincer move. They make the old way illegal before the new way is even functional. If you look at the text of SB 704, they didn't just stop at finished barrels. They included anything that has reached a stage of manufacture where it can be readily completed, assembled, or converted into a barrel. This is the same vague language they used for firearm precursor parts in the ghost gun regulations. What does readily mean? Is a steel tube with a certain inner diameter now a barrel in the eyes of a DOJ agent? If you're a hobbyist who likes to tinker or do your own machining, you are now walking through a legal minefield. Let's look at a real-world scenario. Imagine it's February 2026. You're working on a custom build, maybe a long-range precision rifle, and you find a great deal on a high-end match-grade barrel from an out-of-state company. In 2024, you'd hit buy now, and it shows up at your door. But now, because of SB 704, that company can't ship it to your house. If they do, and you receive it, you've both technically participated in an illegal transfer. Why? Because as of January 1st, 2026, the law requires that the transaction be completed in person at a California FFL. Even though the $5 background check and the formal DOJ registry don't start until July 2027, the requirement for a dealer to intermediate the sale is already live. I've already heard from guys who tried to order parts last week, only to get a cancellation email saying, "Due to California SB 704, we can no longer ship this item to your zip code. These companies don't want to guess which part of the law is operative and which is effective. They just cut the state off entirely. This is de facto gun control. They don't have to ban the part if they make it too legally risky for anyone to sell it to you." Now, if you thought the barrel stuff was a headache, wait until you hear about SB 53. This one is a sleeper that is going to catch a lot of people off guard. Starting January 1st, 2026, California has completely rewritten the rules for how you keep a firearm in your own home. Previously, the law generally cared about storage if you had children or prohibited persons in the house. If you lived alone or with other law-abiding adults, you could keep a home defense pistol in a nightstand drawer. Not anymore. SB 53 mandates that all firearms in a residence must be securely stored in a DOJ-approved locked box or safe unless they are being carried or readily controlled by the owner. Let that sink in. If you're asleep and your home defense gun is in a drawer, even if you live alone, you are technically in violation of SB 53. The law defines readily controlled as being in close enough proximity to prevent an unauthorized person from grabbing the gun. But here's the catch. How does the state enforce this? They aren't going door to door yet, but imagine this scenario. You have a break-in. You use your firearm to defend your family. The police arrive to take a report. They see your gun sitting on the counter, or they ask where it was when the intruder entered. If you say it was under my pillow, and you don't have a DOJ-approved lock on it or a safe within arm's reach that it just came out of, you could be cited. The first two violations are infractions, but the third is a misdemeanor. And remember, in California, certain misdemeanors can lead to a 10-year prohibition on owning firearms. They are using safety as a pretext to create a paper trail of violations that eventually strips you of your rights entirely. Think about a college student or a young professional living with roommates. Under the new 2026 rules, if even one of your roommates has a decades-old prohibited mark on their record, maybe a specific misdemeanor they forgot to tell you about, and your firearm isn't in a DOJ-approved safe, you are now committing a crime just by living there. The state is essentially making it a legal liability to be a gun owner in a shared living space. They want the cost of exercising your Second Amendment right, both the literal cost of the safes and the legal risk, to be so high that you just decide it isn't worth it. I keep coming back to this because it's the most important part of what's happening in 2026. Why make a law effective in January but operative in July of the next year? It's to defeat the courts. If the California Rifle and Pistol Association or the Second Amendment Foundation tries to sue on January 2nd, the state's lawyers will stand up and say, "Your Honor, the plaintiffs haven't been injured yet. The background check system isn't even turned on. This lawsuit is premature." Meanwhile, you're the one being injured because you can't buy parts. You're spending hundreds on new safes, and you're living in fear of a storage violation if you leave your gun out while you go to the bathroom. They are buying themselves time to let these laws settle in and become the new normal before a judge can even look at the merits of the case. Now, we've covered the barrel background checks and the new safe storage traps, but we need to talk about the heavy hitters that are going to fundamentally change what you can even find on a gun store shelf in California. And then we're going to discuss something truly unprecedented, a law that doesn't target guns at all, but targets speech itself. If you've been following the news, you've probably heard people whispering about a Glock ban. That's because of AB 1127. Which targets what the state calls machine gun convertible pistols. Starting July 1st, 2026, it becomes illegal for a dealer to sell or transfer any semi-automatic pistol that features a cruciform trigger bar that can be readily converted into a machine gun using a pistol converter, commonly known as a Glock switch. Here's the catch. The state is defining almost the entire Glock lineup as convertible, simply because third-party criminals have invented a plastic switch that plugs into them. It's like banning a specific model of car because someone else invented a way to make it go 200 mph. For any pistol on the roster as of January 1st, 2026, manufacturers have a tiny window to prove their design isn't easily convertible, or they get booted off the roster. We are looking at a future where the most popular self-defense handgun in America could be completely unavailable for new purchase in California by 2027. And let's talk about the sheer audacity of AB 1078. You might remember that the courts recently struck down California's one gun per month rule as unconstitutional. How did Sacramento respond? Did they respect the court's ruling? Of course not. They passed AB 1078, which, starting April 1st, 2026, limits you to 3 firearm purchases every 30 days. Now, some people might say, who needs more than 3 guns a month? That's not the point. The point is the principle. Imagine if the government told you that you could only go to church 3 times a month, or that you were limited to 3 social media posts every 30 days. You would be outraged. This is the state rationing a constitutional right. They are testing the waters to see how much of a limit the courts will tolerate before they try to push it back down to 1 or 0. Imagine you're a collector, or you've just moved to California and want to get a home defense shotgun, a CCW pistol, and a rimfire rifle for your kid to learn on. If you find a great deal at a closing gun store on April 2nd, and you try to buy a 4th item, even a small .22 caliber plinker, the DOJ system will flag you. You're not a criminal, you haven't done anything wrong, but the system will treat you like a straw purchaser just because you hit an arbitrary number decided by a politician in an air-conditioned office in Sacramento. But now I need to talk about something that might be the most insidious law of them all, and it's one that a lot of people haven't been paying attention to. Assembly Bill 2571. This law officially takes effect on January 1st, 2026, and unlike most gun control laws that focus on the hardware, the guns themselves, this one focuses on the speech surrounding firearms. Yes, you heard that right. California is now regulating what you can say about guns and how you can say it. AB 2571 prohibits firearm industry members from advertising or marketing firearms in a manner that is, quote, reasonably likely to appeal to minors. Now that sounds simple enough on the surface, right? Don't market guns to kids. Everyone can agree with that. But here's where California's strategy comes into play, and this is something they do all the time. They write these laws with incredibly vague language that can be interpreted in dozens of different ways, which means that gun owners, retailers, manufacturers, and even content creators are left guessing about what's actually legal and what could land them in serious trouble. Let me give you a real-life example of why this is such a problem. There's a firearms retailer in Sacramento who's been in business for over 30 years. They're a family-owned shop, good people, they do everything by the book. Well, back in October, they posted on their social media about a youth shooting program they were hosting. It was a completely legitimate program designed to teach kids firearm safety, marksmanship, and responsibility under strict supervision with trained instructors and parental consent. This is the kind of program that's been around for generations, the kind of thing that actually reduces gun accidents because it teaches respect and proper handling. But under AB 2571, that post could now be considered illegal marketing that appeals to minors. Think about that for a second. A post promoting gun safety education for kids could be considered criminal activity under this new law. The shop owner told me he's now terrified to post anything on social media. He's worried that a picture of a pink AR-15, which he stocks because adult women buy them, could be considered appealing to minors because of the color. He's worried that using any cartoon imagery or bright colors in his advertising could get him prosecuted. He's basically paralyzed with fear about how to run his business. And that's exactly the point. That's what California wants. They want compliance through confusion. They want self-censorship through fear. Because here's the thing, when the law is vague enough, people will restrict themselves far more than the law actually requires, just to be safe. And that's how you effectively kill an industry without actually banning anything outright. According to the text of AB 2571, a firearm industry member includes manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, importers, and retailers. But here's where it gets even more concerning. The definition is broad enough that it could potentially include content creators, bloggers, influencers, and anyone who receives any form of compensation related to firearms content. That means if you're a YouTuber who reviews firearms and you have affiliate links, you could potentially be considered a firearm industry member under this law. There's a gun rights activist in Los Angeles who runs an Instagram page. She's a young woman, very knowledgeable about firearms, and she creates content specifically targeted at other young women who are interested in self-defense. She uses bright, engaging graphics. She uses modern social media techniques. She makes firearms seem accessible and not scary to women who might otherwise be intimidated by gun culture. Well, guess what? Under AB 2571, her entire approach could be considered appealing to minors, even though her content is clearly marked as 18 plus, and she never ever targets her content toward anyone under 18. She told me she's already been forced to completely redesign her entire content strategy. No more bright colors, no more fun graphics, no more using any imagery that could possibly be construed as youthful or appealing. She's basically having to make her content as boring and unappealing as possible just to stay on the safe side of this law. And the tragic thing is her content was actually getting through to young women in dangerous situations who needed to learn about self-defense options. Now, she's worried that making her content less engaging means fewer women will pay attention, which could literally put lives at risk. The penalties for violating AB 2571 are absolutely insane. We're talking about potential criminal charges, civil penalties, and the ability for the California Attorney General to bring enforcement actions. That means the state can come after you with the full weight of government resources. For a small business owner, even defending yourself against these charges could bankrupt you, regardless of whether you win or lose. And California knows this. They're counting on it. The law provides some examples of what's prohibited, but they're so broad that they basically cover everything. It includes things like cartoon characters, imagery that depicts firearms in bright colors, imagery that depicts minors, celebrities, or influencers who are under 18 or appear to be under 18, and any depiction that represents firearms in a manner that suggests they're appropriate for minors. Think about how broad that is. A picture of a hunting rifle next to a campfire could suggest that firearms are appropriate for minors if you're taking kids camping. An image of a father teaching his son to shoot could be illegal. A video review of a .22 rifle, which is literally the gun most people learn to shoot with as kids, could be considered appealing to minors. The entire concept of youth shooting sports, which have existed for over 100 years and have one of the best safety records of any youth activity, could be effectively criminalized under this law. There's a competitive shooter in Northern California who's been shooting competitively since he was 12 years old. He's now in his 30s, and he's one of the top precision rifle shooters in the country. He coaches young shooters through a formal program that's affiliated with USA Shooting, which is the actual Olympic governing body for shooting sports. These kids are training for Olympic competition. This is as legitimate as it gets. Well, he has a YouTube channel where he posts training videos, competition footage, and educational content. He's never marketed anything to minors. He doesn't sell anything. He's literally just documenting his sport and his coaching. But under AB 2571, every video he has that shows a minor shooting, even in an Olympic training context, could potentially be considered illegal marketing that appeals to minors. He's now talking about shutting down his entire channel because he can't risk potential criminal charges for documenting a legitimate Olympic sport. Think about the absurdity of that. California is essentially saying that showing the reality of youth competitive shooting, which has produced Olympic medalists and taught countless young people discipline, focus, and responsibility, is illegal marketing. It's like saying you can't show footage of youth football because it might encourage kids to want to play football. And here's what's really strategic about when California chose to implement this law, January 1st, 2026. That gives firearm industry members exactly a few weeks from now to completely overhaul their marketing, their social media, their websites, their print materials, everything. And here's the kicker. There's no clear guidance from the state about what's actually compliant. The Attorney General's office hasn't issued detailed regulations. There's no safe harbor provisions. There's no way to get pre-approval for your marketing materials. You're just expected to figure it out on your own and hope you don't get prosecuted. This is a strategy that California uses all the time. They pass these vague laws right at the end of the year, give people almost no time to comply, provide no clear guidance, and then wait to see who they can make an example of. It's regulation through intimidation, and it's incredibly effective at chilling speech and commerce, even if the law eventually gets overturned in court. So what do? How do we live as law-abiding citizens when the law changes faster than we can read it? First, audit your storage. Don't wait. If you don't have a DOJ-approved safe for every firearm in your house, get one now. Whether you live alone or with others, SB 53 makes open storage a liability you can't afford. Second, buy your parts now. If you're planning a build, buy your barrels and precursor parts before the shipping freeze from out-of-state companies happens. Even if the background checks don't start until 2027, retailers are already pulling the plug on California shipments. Third, if you're in the firearms industry in any capacity, if you run a gun store, create content online, run a shooting range, or offer training programs, you need to review every piece of marketing material you have. Consult with an attorney if necessary. The consequences for getting AB 2571 wrong could be devastating. Fourth, support the challengers. Groups like the CRPA, FPC, and SAF are already sharpening their pencils for January 1st. They need plaintiffs, real people who are being affected by these laws, to bring these cases to court. They need members and they need funding to fight these battles. And finally, education is ammunition. Share this information. The state relies on your confusion. They want you to be so afraid of breaking a law you don't understand that you just stop participating in your rights altogether. Don't let them win through intimidation. The reality of 2026 is that California is making it a full-time job just to stay legal. They're attacking from every angle: barrels, storage, purchase limits, the guns themselves, and now even the ability to talk about firearms in normal human terms. They're trying to make gun culture itself illegal. They're trying to make it impossible to pass down firearms traditions to the next generation. If they can't take your guns, they'll settle for making sure your kids never want them in the first place. I want to thank you all for sticking with me through this deep dive. If this helped clear up the confusion about everything hitting California in 2026, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel fight against the algorithms that try to suppress this kind of content. Give it a thumbs up if you found value in this, and ring that alarm bell so you don't miss the next update. You all have a great day, stay safe, and stay informed.